there's a through line in the way I've been analyzing politics lately. It's this: how we got here and how we get out. And what do I mean by here? I mean the politics of division, the politics where we emphasize what separates us, not what we share, where every identity slice gets thinner, every disagreement gets sharper, and the incentive structure rewards conflict over consensus. It's not a new thought from me. You've heard me talk about this before. So I'm not naive. Politics has always had conflict. That's not the point. But it hasn't always been this polarized, this performative, this locked into division as the strategy itself. So today I want to walk you through two moments, two sort of forks in the road, if you will, that I think actually go a long way in explaining how we ended up here. And perhaps it actually, by figuring out how we got here, it's perhaps a path for a better politics and, frankly, for a potential future president to take advantage of. So here's fork one. It was 2004 in the age of micro-targeting. Before 2004, campaigns treated undecided voters as moderates, centrist types, vacillating between the two parties. That's why the closing TV ads of your youth used to sound so bipartisan. Democrats would brag about working with Republicans like John McCain, or Republicans like, Jeb Bush or something like that. Republicans would point out deals that they cut with Democrats like Ted Kennedy. You pick the most, even the most ideological candidates in their final ads wanted to look like they knew how to be consensus builders, right? Why did we find out about Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy? Because Orrin Hatch wanted to brag about it. He thought it was good politics for him. By the way, Kennedy thought it was good politics for him to brag about his relationship with Orrin Hatch. Because the belief was simple. Undecideds were wooable if you could sound more consensus-oriented than the other guy. But 2004 changed that, right? Karl Rove and the Bush reelection campaign team pioneered what we called then, and what we still kind of call, micro-targeting. They built detailed voter files that told them exactly what church you went to, what magazines you subscribed to. Yes, magazines. Now, of course, it would be what subscriptions you have on the internet, but stay with me here. What causes you supported. Suddenly, campaigns didn't have to guess about undecideds. They actually knew who they were. And the big discovery, the undecideds weren't centrist. Not at all. They were independent, but they were independents who didn't fit neatly into either party. But they had strong views on certain issues, right, which kept them from being in one party or the other. But if you hit those pressure points, if you told them you agreed with them on that one issue, you could win them over. Right? You might find an independent who was, an economic populist, but cared about gun ownership, or you might find a fiscal conservative that cared about Planned Parenthood. You see where I'm going here, right? So the strategy flipped. Instead of we're all in this together, kind of campaigning, started sending surgical messages to activate one slice at a time. The Obama 2008 campaign in some ways took this to another level with digital tools. And yeah, Obama wrapped it up in some unity rhetoric, no red states, no blue states. And in fact, that might explain why he's the only 21st century presidential candidate to win by more than 5 percentage points, right? Essentially to have a decisive victory, an actual popular vote mandate. But by 2012, and certainly by 2016, there was no attempt at a unity messaging, right? It was all about slicing and dicing. That was the whole ball game. And then, of course, came the big accelerant, social media, right? This all seemed to fit together. Facebook and Twitter were built on the same logic as micro-targeting, right? They came up, by the way, they start up just after the micro-targeting boom of campaigns in 2004. Both of those entities, right? So it was narrowcasting, engagement, slicing people into categories. Campaign ads fit perfectly into that system. Division wasn't just a campaign tactic anymore. It became a business model. And the uncomfortable truth is this. Our politics were less divisive when campaigns actually knew less about us, about voters. Once campaigns and these tech platforms started seeing us as fragments, learning about us in fragmented pieces, if you will, well, they treated us like fragments. And when all you see are things that divide you, then it's division that becomes your identity. And that takes me to the second fork in the road. And that was the total, complete misinterpretation of the 2012 election. That I think is one of the original sins, if you will, to borrow a phrase. Barack Obama's reelection should have been much harder. The economy was sluggish, unemployment was high, history said he was more likely to lose than win because of that high unemployment. But he didn't. Why? Well, he reframed the question. It wasn't, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, considering you took over during the Great Recession? That was never going to be a good way to talk to voters. Instead, he asked, will you be better off 4 years from now? And then he cast Mitt Romney as the wrong answer, the out-of-touch boss who wasn't on your side. One of the best examples of this strategy came on Saturdays in the fall of 2012. The Obama campaign bought up airtime on the Big Ten network, something campaigns hadn't done before at the time. College football Saturdays, and they hammered Romney as a job outsourcer to China. These ads barely even mention Obama not by name, basically just I'm Barack Obama and I paid for this. That was it. The entire thing was aimed squarely at working class voters in Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. All 5 states Obama would carry in 2012, by the way. And of course, these are the very states that working class coalition became the heart of Trump's MAGA coalition. But at its core, what Obama was appealing to was class, not identity. Obama won those voters by convincing them Romney didn't understand their lives. He was out of touch. He didn't get them. I'm with you. He's not, right? Ultimately, I've always believed that's the most important question. Who's with you? Who do you think's with you? But it's not the lesson Democrats absorbed from that victory in 2012. Instead, they convinced themselves Obama had won because of demographics, because of the so-called coalition of the ascendant, Black voters, Latino voters, young people, single women. They believed demographics were destiny. Ironically, Republicans at the time, pre-Trump Republicans, drew the same conclusion, just in reverse. Their 2013 autopsy said they needed to reach out to minority voters because identity was going to dominate future politics, right? Both parties embraced this, what now looks like faulty conventional wisdom about what happened in 2012. But what if that was the wrong lesson? I think it was. What if the real reason Obama won was class? What if the decisive blow was Romney's 47% remark? If that's true, then Democrats spent the last decade chasing the wrong strategy, doubling down on identity politics just as class was reasserting itself. Clinton leaned into the first woman president in 2016, shattering the glass ceiling, while Trump talked about forgotten men and women. Biden tried to reclaim some of the class frame in 2020, but the party still treated identity as its foundation, hence the promises he made about VP and about the Supreme Court. Those were identity promises, not class promises. By 2024, that coalition of the ascendant theory was exhausted and clearly not big enough to win. And the irony here, Trump's populism, as cynical as it is at times, actually has more in common with Obama's 2012 message, even Mondale's appeals back in 1984 to working class solidarity, than with Reagan's or Bush's republicanism. And that's the thing you cannot ever forget, right? The real divide of our era hasn't been race or cultural identity. It's been class, right? It's what drove us in the 20th century. So what are the consequences of basically these two forks in the road? Put them together, microtargeting and the misreading of 2012, and you get today's politics. Campaigns that no longer practice the muscle of unity, parties that organize themselves in identity silos, social media amplifies it all, and it creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Campaigns fragment us to win. Platforms reward division because division drives engagement. Voters consume difference and sort themselves more deeply into tribes, focusing on difference rather than on what unites us. And parties double down on identity appeals, treating consensus as weakness, right? The result, a politics that overvalues division at the expense of coalition. Be careful when somebody says, well, you got to stand for something. Well, the something can be to bring the country together. That's not a bullshit something. I think it's a good something. But it shows up not just in campaigns, it now shows up in governing. Politicians who win by scraping 50% plus one feel no obligation to reach beyond that slice. But just look at how partisanly both Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis govern the state of Texas. They do not govern the state of Texas as a whole or the state of Florida as a whole. They only govern the red parts, right? They almost go to war with the blue cities if they can. They think that's good politics. But here's the irony. America's strength has always been the opposite. We're not an ethnic nation. We're not a religious nation. We're a collection of people from everywhere, bound by an idea. And at our best moments, our politics reflects that. And here's where I want to leave you. It's worth remembering the public does respond to unity messages if they're delivered authentically, right? Think back to Reagan's 1984 Morning in America ad. That wasn't a micro-targeted message. It was a broad appeal to shared optimism, and it worked across party lines. Obama's 2004 keynote address really resonated. There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. Speech launched him nationally because people wanted to believe that messaging. The lesson isn't that unity is easy or that division will disappear. The lesson is that politicians still have a choice. You can be a 50% plus one leader and lead by division and survive politically by division. It's a way to win. It's a way to stay in office. It's not a way to be in the history books. Or you can claim to be a 60% consensus leader. One is arithmetic, the other is nation building. We haven't had a nation builder as president, arguably, since Obama this century. And, we haven't, the irony is that, and maybe that was the Cold War mentality that made us think we needed to think as one, because Reagan and Clinton in many ways shared very similar rhetoric, even as they were of two different political parties, because that was the 20th century rewarded leaders who spoke to the whole. The 21st century so far has rewarded those who narrowcast to the part. But pendulums swing, and when the next leader comes along who can authentically summon the politics of unity, not just say the words, but actually do it in deeds, we're going to rediscover something important. Americans still want to hear this. They still want to believe this. And most importantly, I think they want to see us govern that way.